Thank you. Yeah. So I was thinking about this list as I printed it out today before we were going to do this live stream, and I was looking through this list, and it occurred to me, where was the infallible magisterial guidance of the Roman See in the midst of these, 29, 30 examples that you have of forgeries? But now they're not all cited by the Pope, but I mean, in many cases they are, and it's sort of it stymies the mind to ask the question: where was the Spirit guiding the Romans? Did the Spirit not want to tell the Roman See that these are forgeries that are being cited, or is papal infallibility just not what we think that it is, right? And so we're kind of left with one of these dilemmas where it's like, well, we were infallible when we were right, but all those instances where things were wrong, that was actually the instances where we were fallible, right? The other times we're infallible. So we're kind of left at this impasse of this sort of begging the question motif that's so consistent with the Roman Catholic apologetic approach. So yeah, where was the magisterial guidance to not know that forgeries were being cited in many cases?
Yeah, that definitely.
All right, so let's go ahead, Snake.
Does on one side you have the infallibility that is supposed to bring some level of omniscience, or at least guarantee truth. And I've seen many people when we discussed with Ibarra on our Discord, and when we discuss with other apologists, I would say that there is some level of an undefeatable ignorance that applies as well.
Right.
Invincible ignorance. So it's weird. So you have simultaneously some level of omniscience and at the same time some level of ignorance. It is present all over the documents. If you look at Vatican I, you even have factual errors. You have factual and historical errors. But yeah, many declaration, and we're gonna dive into the biggest example. But many magisterial declaration use documents that are factually false, that are factually forgeries, and that the Vatican admits to be forgeries today.
Right. All right, so let's get into it. Where do you want to take us first?
Yeah, we could start with the donation of Constantine. It's a really well-known forgery. I mean, that and the Pseudo-Isidorian decretals, but I think it did. This is pretty important and worth noting. Maybe the most interesting part about this is that Pope Leo IX, on the eve of the schism in the early 1050s, he cited nearly the entire donation of Constantine to Michael Cerularius, the Patriarch of Constantinople, and telling him this is the proof of our supremacy, and he so confidently insists upon it. And more than that, he says we don't appeal to fables, old wives' stories, and it's as if he was utterly ignorant that this is inauthentic. And so it's pretty significant that this was cited right on the eve of the schism and twice by Pope Leo IX to justify that schism.
Yeah.
Along with claims that the Greeks removed the filioque from the creed. I mean, the document excommunicating the Orthodox in 1054 says that the Orthodox removed the filioque from the creed, and that's not historically accurate because it was never in there to begin with.
Right.
But they didn't seem to.
Yeah, and there you have even New Advent. I've got New Advent on the screen. You can see that Catholic Encyclopedia, is yes, this is a forged document, but we're pointing out here that this has been used as a justification, in particular here in the situation of the schism itself.
Yeah, I mean, we could. I don't know if we should read a passage from it, or to
sure,
see what. Ahead. Yeah, well, so in this it reads. As the blessed Peter is seen to have been constituted vicar of the Son of God on the earth, so the pontiffs, who are the representatives of that same chief of the apostles, should obtain from us in our empire the power of a supremacy greater than the clemency of our earthly imperial serenity, etc. And saying that the chief of the apostles and his vicars are our constant intercessors with God. This is from the donation of Constantine, and it was cited by no less than 10 popes at least. I found a few more. I found about 13 popes who either cited it directly or made like an incidental reference to it.
Okay, that's a good point there, because a Catholic was, this is just some anomaly, so what, there was a forgery. Well, no, this is if it's cited by 13 different popes, then that's more relevant. And by the way, in that citation that you have in your notes that you sent me, it goes on to talk about that the supremacy is over all the principal sees. Not just the temporal power of the emperor, but it's also full supremacy over the other patriarchates, which violates Canon 6 of Nicaea, and it violates the apostolic canons as well.
Yes. And it is interesting that this is, in the Catholic Encyclopedia itself, they admit a lot of things. It is fairly impartial on some of these important points. They admit that the first time a pope officially cited the donation, it was in 1054 on the eve of the schism. It was Pope Leo IX who cited it in the most bold fashion. Others just made a more smaller references to it. But he cites 2 full pages in Latin.
Wow.
Yeah. What's very interesting is that it doesn't cite Matthew 16:18. You know, if today there was this question, it would be like, you know, the Pope will send Matthew 16:18 there, you know, appeal to evidence from Scripture. But that's very late. If you look at the schism, there were 3 grounds for it. The fact that the Greeks supposedly removed the filioque from the creed, which is a factual historical error. It didn't happen. It was added. The fact that Greek priests could be married men, which today the Vatican admits that, you know, historically they changed it and they accepted through the unions, and the use of leavened bread. So there are 3 reasons. All of them are wrong, and there is, by virtue of one authority, the donation of Constantine, which is also wrong. So if you look at this and think like, okay, there was this united church before schism, and if you look at who's on the wrong side of the schism, it's Rome, because Rome initiated it on wrong grounds with a wrong authority, and today they admit it.
Right.
And that's why we'll see that many forgeries are pertaining to the authority of the Pope, the authority of Peter, and the filioque. Because that's the original sin of the church.
Exactly. This is a great point.
They were right about the filioque to justify schism, because they're in the wrong.
Yeah.
In terms of this schism.
So the forgeries were necessary to justify their actions, and that's crucial to understand. You might say, well, these are just historical accidents and anomalies. No. It was necessary to do this to justify the actions of the schism, and to justify, oh, well, you removed the filioque from the creed. I mean, who is so stupid as to think that the filioque was removed from the creed? This is utterly ridiculous.
Yeah, I like how the Orthodox encyclical of 1895, it says that the Latins condemned themselves by their own ignorance. Yes. I like the phrasing of that, because they condemn those who mess with the creed, then they're condemning themselves by their ignorance.
Yeah, if you're condemned for changing the creed, then you're condemning yourself, because we didn't change the creed. And I think everybody should know this by now. This is utterly ridiculous. Okay, so there's more here in your notes on the donation. Is there anything else you want to touch on there?
Yeah, I guess I should quote from the Catholic Encyclopedia on the donation, where it says, they affirm that this document is without doubt a forgery, fabricated somewhere between the years 750 and 850, and that it was generally considered authentic until the 15th century. That it was exposed by the treatise of Lorenzo Valla in 1440, which is said to have proved the forgery with certainty. But even after it was exposed in the Renaissance, still Roman Catholic defenders of the donation existed. In fact, it's very interesting that we find a few inquisitors and officials in the Roman Church saying, as I quoted, "He who denies the donation lies under suspicion of heresy." And others, others say you come near to heresy if you pronounce the donation to be null and void. And it seems it finally was abandoned at the end of the 16th century after Baronius, the Roman historian, admitted that it was a forgery. But and I like what Dollinger says about it. I mean, maybe in my book I do make extensive quotations. I don't know how that might work in a live feed, but I think I might as well read this paragraph of Dollinger.
That's fine.
If you're okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So he says, on the other hand, Nicholas Tudeschi, who was considered by his contemporaries as the greatest of all canonists, declares that he who denies the donation lies under suspicion of heresy. Cardinal Parisius and the Spanish bishop Arnold Albertinus declare the same. Whosoever pronounces the donation to be null and void, says the latter, comes very near to heresy. But whosoever maintains that it never took place at all is in a still worse case. Antonius Rosellus and Ludwig Gomez are of the same opinion, and Cardinal Hieronymus Albano declares this much at least, that there exist shameless persons who refuse to submit to the unity of the fathers respecting the donation. Or according to the expression of Petrus Ignaeus, to the Tota Academia Canonistarum et Legistarum, the whole academy of canonists and legislators, with the whole host of theologians to boot. But after Cardinal Baronius had once for all confessed the unauthenticity of the donation, all these voices, which had shortly before been so numerous and so loud, became dumb. So that's what Dollinger says. He had been a Roman Catholic for 50 years. A professor for 50 years, a Roman Catholic for 80 years, and then he rejected the Vatican Council. And
Dollinger actually is one of the foremost scholars in terms of the forgery. So I have a book here. It's called The Papacy, Its Origins in the Middle Ages, and its continuation. And so it's 600 pages, 350 of them are just references where he shows forgeries.
I recommend that book. Yeah, I've read it. It's really good.
So he's just exposing, and he says that there is a systemic problem of forgeries. He supposes there was even a full department of the Vatican that was dedicated to forging stuff.
Oh, wow.
So, something interesting about the donation of Constantine is that it was still quoted by some Roman Catholic even after there was general admission that they were wrong, especially Alphonsus Liguri. So but you know about it. So legally,
So the doctor of the church who justifies lying and who obsesses on the way that everyone is going to be punished in hell, he still cites these as these forged documents, even after it was admitted pretty much by everybody.
Yeah, Ligori does. I mean, I know at least the pseudo-Isidorian decretals. I'm not sure about the donation.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah, for the pseudo-Isidorian for sure. He admits it in his own writings. Like in his own writings, he says that these are forged, but yeah, he still uses it, and he's honored as the most zealous doctor.
Well, why if we're gonna? I mean, what's wrong with lying if we just keep people from leaving the bark of Peter, right? I mean, if you leave the bark of Peter, you lose your soul, so it's justified lying.
Yeah, that's the casuistical immorality. Yeah, that's it's not moral, but that's a separate.
Yeah, that's
issue.
why it's called casuistry. Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's what we have a problem with. I mean, it just opens the door to all this nonsense, and this is why you see a lot of people in the trad world acting the way that they do. They have a worldview which is based on all this nonsense, and so they have to prop it up and act like goblins. I mean, and they just can't deal with the facts. They can't deal with that their own church, right, is gone into the downward spiral of madness that it has because of being based on centuries and centuries and centuries of lies and deceptions. That's what you get. The end result is a giant pedo cult.
Yeah, it's really crazy to see how much forgeries were used. I mean, it's startling. I mean, I had a lot of sympathy for the traditionalist Roman Catholics. That's what got me interested in this, like coming across some of these online saying, okay, if you're not Roman Catholic, then you're not saved. So it's absolutely necessary you become Roman Catholic. And well, this is an important subject affecting each of us, the
Absolutely.
question of our salvation. So I personally felt I wanted to follow up. Sometimes maybe one thing I really would insist upon always is verify references. Whenever you come across some kind of citation or quote mine, as Sneck mentioned, I love these quote mines. If you look at the citations, sometimes you'll find it's inauthentic. Sometimes you'll find it's misquoted. Yeah. I gave some examples we could talk about later tonight.
Yeah, I'm just going to make a small rant about quote mines and stuff. Oftentimes you will find, a Catholic apologetics website, just rows of, 20 quotes. Right. And, you've demonstrated with UB last time that sometimes you can have legitimate quotes that are quoted, out of context, that are quoted in a way that doesn't prove Roman supremacy, that prove, primacy and honor. Saints are quoted without, their life. For example, how can Augustine be a papist if he presided over a council that says that you cannot appeal to Rome? And so that's one problem. But when you go, sometimes you will find some quotes, that more contentious. And if you look, they're usually listed, in quote mines and Roman apologetic website. If you look at the quote actually brings you to a book. The book will bring you to the PG and the PL, which are, Patrologia Greca, Patrologia Latina, the big volumes of patristics. And when you go in there, and actually one of my mentor, Jean, apostatized from the SSPX just by looking at this, because when you go in there, you'll see that the text itself admits that there were modifications. Sometimes you will have footnotes where it says, this text was modified to fit the Roman doctrine. You will have variations. So sometimes you will have an Orthodox variation in the footnotes. Sometimes you will have the Orthodox variation, but the Catholic website will still quote a footnote that is an alternate Catholic version, very papist. Sometimes you will have the Greek saying two words, and the two words will be translated into Latin into two paragraphs.
I've seen
one about the filioque, one about the primacy of Peter. So just looking at this text is already a big problem. Like you see that the texts themselves, they admit it's a mess. They admit.
It's messy, right? And a lot of the normie tier pop apologists don't even care about this. There's no concern for this. If you're reading, Stephen Ray or Dave Armstrong or these kind of guys, you're just going to get these books that basically just do the quote mine. Oh, look, here's 20 quotes. So therefore, Catholic Answer shows you that, Patrick Madrid, all these guys do the exact same thing. Mark Shea, it's just a copy paste model from websites. And then like Sneck says, when you actually go and look at the quotes, there's more to it than that. There's variations on this, and these guys don't ever even touch on the famous long list of forgeries. So you want to move on to the next one, the pseudo-Isidorian decretals?
I just had one more thing to say about the quote craze. Sometimes the website will even willfully stop a quote, and actually the Demon Brothers do this. So they will list the apostles, and they will just end everything after Peter.
Yeah, right.
So the bishops are important. They would stop everything after the Pope.
Lying by omission. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sometimes you will have willful mistranslations. Sometimes they will add added notes and so on. But sometimes you still find one in a million you will find one quote that still looks papal. And then if you go to the manuscript, and if you could pull up this picture of the manuscript, sometimes you will find you will have to go to the manuscript, and in the manuscript you'll see that there are blatant things that were added.
Right.
So, for example, here's an example. I don't know if you have it on screen, but of Saint Gregory the Great, and in his dialogues. So, Book 2, Chapter 38, you can see that there was et filio added. So, in the manuscript itself, someone came after and added a mention, of procession by the Father and the Son. The Son was added. I don't know if you can pull up the picture.
I would if I had it. I don't have this. I'm on two different computers, so one of them is logged into Skype and the other one isn't. So I don't have the. If you send if you send an image to me on Discord, I can put that up.
Yeah, sure. I'll do this right now.
Okay. Go ahead.
So even if you go to the manuscript, you'll see that there are still forgeries, and it's still it's still a huge problem. So that's why we shouldn't give in to the quote mine. If you actually take your time, you will find that there will be layers of errors. And not everybody has the time to read the entire shaft set. You read it, and reading the entire shaft set, you understand it a little bit better. So yeah, that was just my rant about quote mines. Don't take them for granted. Ask for the sources. Look at the sources. People will just quote them without even thinking.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm pulling these images up here, and I'm going to put this on the screen for us here. And so this is from one of Gregory's dialogues, and you can see that this has been added here. So
yeah, that's from the original manuscript. You have the filio. Just justifies the filio quick.
It's just written up there in the in the margins.
Yeah, sometimes it's even more blatant. Sometimes you will see that a different ink was used. You can see the difference in coloration, different ink, different time period, different writings. Sometimes you will even see different writing styles because it evolves. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got it on the screen. You can see that it's added up there. So. From the Roman mindset, he taught filioque. There it is, right there, and you can clearly see that someone has added that there at some point.
Yeah, but people will not go to the manuscripts. They won't even go to the books that quote the PGs, as they will, of course, never go to the PG and PL. So they don't do the work. It's based on ignorance, and that's a big problem. People who just quote mine, and it's not scholarly. It's not decent. But and it's oftentimes not honest. But we've already demonstrated with Ligurianism and so on that if you can lie by admission, if you can be generally dishonest, but still bring people to Rome, it's not a big deal. So I guess now we can move on to this big list.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Should we go on to that? We can talk about the filioque later. I did prepare some notes about that, including that quote of Gregory.